You're listening to the Sticks in the Six podcast. Here are your co-hosts, Andrew Forbes, Peter Barricchini, and Alex Hobson.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 165 of Sticks in the Six. I'm your host, Andrew Forbes, here with one of my co-hosts, Peter Barricchini, and we're going a third straight week without Alex. Some technical difficulties on his end, but he'll be coming back full force, and we're excited to get him back as soon as possible. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, we're brought to you by the fine folks at the Hockey Podcast Network, as well as DraftKings, and the fine folks at Manscaped. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to announce that smooth sack summer is officially upon us. When you're playing in the summer sun, make sure you're groomed from pubes to bum. Thanks to our friends at Manscaped, you can make this season your smoothest yet. The Performance Package 5.0 Ultra is the ultimate bundle to keep your boys downstairs cool while looking hot. Join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with our exclusive offer. Get 20% off plus free shipping when you go to manscaped.com and use code THPN. Summertime, and the trimming is easy. Always worried about getting a little too close to the boys downstairs? The Manscaped Performance Package 5.0 Ultra has everything you need to prepare that summer bod. Every man knows how scary it can get when going for a close shave below the belt. That's why I trust Manscaped for all my sensitive areas. Inside this package, you'll find the star of the show, the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. Their 5th generation trimmer features 2 interchangeable next-gen skin-safe blade heads, a standard one for taking a little off the top, and a new foil blade to go smooth wherever your heart desires. We also have dual LED spotlights to provide contrast on multiple skin tones, 3 length setting combs, and, did I mention, this trimmer is waterproof too. Beach, lake, or shower, this razor will devour even the strongest pubes. Now that you have the perfect haircut, use Manscaped's liquid formulations to keep that freshness even at the hottest summer barbecues. The Crop Soother Aftershave Lotion and Crop Preserver Anti-Chafe Ball Deodorant. Once they touch your sack, you'll never go back. Manscaped even threw in 2 free gifts to their Performance Package 5.0. The Manscaped Boxers and the Shed Travel Bag. More wet products? Say no more. Manscaped's new Buff Bundle is all you need to keep your summer heat a breeze. This bundle includes their signature silicone scrubber plus body wash. Ditch your nasty loofah and grab a taste of freshness. Get 20% off plus free shipping with code THPN at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code THPN at manscaped.com. It's smooth sack summer, boys. Get on board or get left behind. And I got to say, Peter, you're back from Sin City. It seemed like you had some hot days down there. What was it like, my friend?
Buddy, I'm not one for like big time heat or whatever, but man, it was hot. It was hot. Like being in the desert heat, it was actually, it's something you got to experience, but it is something that you don't want to experience at the same time. Like it was absolutely hot, dry, 40 plus weather. I could barely handle the humidity in 30 degree heat and humidity here in Ontario. Once it gets to the afternoon, you want to stay in the shade. You want to stay indoors. You don't want to go anywhere out because it is boiling hot out there. But at night gets a little bit cooler, but not by much. But yeah, heat in the desert, not my cup of tea at this point. But yeah, city itself, phenomenal. Sights, sounds, everything. It's just absolutely phenomenal with all the hotels, the atmosphere on the strip and everything like that. Just going to say this, a lot of interesting characters. That's about it. I'm not going to go any further, but very, very fun experience. Like you said, back from Vegas from the draft, the Sphere, whatever was said about it, it actually lives up to the name. It's phenomenal inside the venue. The NHL put on a really great show with the draft on day 1 and day 2. screen is absolutely massive inside the auditorium, and yeah, it was absolutely the best place to be and have the event or any other event in the future, for shows, anything like that. But the Sphere is basically one of the best, live venues or entertainment venues that I've been to because of the work that went into it inside and out. It was absolutely phenomenal. Like, it was absolutely incredible to see.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, one hell of a show they put on, and just the pictures alone, like the colors, everything that kind of went
Yeah.
into it, truly was a phenomenal sight for any. Not you didn't even have to be a fan of hockey or anything like that. It was just everything that went into it was just amazing. Like I said, if you haven't seen any photos, definitely take a look. You can follow Peter on Instagram or X or whatever, and just the colors that were there, the atmosphere. I mean, it was one hell of a show. I know watching it from the outside, I was intrigued. Obviously, being there, you had to be intrigued. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't kick off this episode with some draft conversation here. Things didn't go maybe as expected in that top 10. Some names were familiar with, your draft rankings, my draft rankings, Logan Horn's draft rankings. Obviously, Macklin Celebrini went number 1 to San Jose. I think that was a given. I don't think anybody was opposed to that actually happening. We all know the ties with him, his dad, and the Golden State Warriors. So that was obviously a conversation point. But then second overall, it wasn't necessarily off the board, but take us through what happened with that second overall pick.
Yeah, I think leading up to the days, it was more of a sense that despite the news that Ivan Demidov was, 6 feet, willing to make the jump to North America sooner rather than later. Yeah, it was enticing, but there was a sense that the Chicago Blackhawks were going to go defense. They needed to bulk up on that right side. They needed to add sort of like a top pairing, game-changing type of defender, and that's basically what you were getting with Artem Lashutov. He was probably most likely going to be the top defender going forward, even though I had Sam Dickinson as my top defender all year long. It makes sense. Right shot. Hard to find that kind of player with that offensive instincts, the drive. Defensive game still have some question marks, but it improved throughout the year, and you started to see the kind of steps that he took with Michigan State. So it kind of seemed like they were leaning more defense leading up to the draft and the days up to it than Ivan Demidov. But 3 was where it got a little bit interesting, because on the day of the draft, obviously betting sites were starting to have Z William at number 3, and there was a lot of talk or chatter about whether it was a possibility or not. But that was when the chaos actually happened with the Anaheim Ducks with number 3. And I think Beckett Seneca, who I was high on last year, high on this year, was always a top 20 pick, moved into my top 15 because of his playoff run with the Oshawa Generals. I think it solidified him as a potential top 10 pick, and even getting higher into that, as we heard at the NHL Combine. Not necessarily like because of the offensive upside, but you started to see what makes him special. And I think that's where things got a little bit hectic and chaotic. And there was a lot of question marks about that. But, he has some of the best hands in the draft, the playmaking skills that he possesses, the ability to drive to the middle of the ice, drawn to opposition, the ability to attack on the rush too. He's trying to find that balance of using that size and using his newfound speed to his advantage, because he had a massive growth spurt from last season into this one. It's hard to teach size when he has that, but it's also hard to teach the skills that he already possesses. So that was the biggest surprise, more so than Chicago going Artem Levshunov. And then everything would determine how the draft was going to unfold after that. Everything kind of seemed to fall into place after that, with other names going to specific teams. Some surprises here and there, but I think the biggest surprise was Seneca going to Anaheim, which was the talk heading into it, into day 1 of the draft while we were entering the Sphere.
Yeah, I mean, I think just the look on Beckett's face when he was selected, and
you could lip read everything.
Yeah. The "Are you fucking kidding me?" type of response. Like, I mean, that was just a classic response. That's exactly what you're looking for, though, from these young kids. You want to. obviously you want a player that has that confidence, that has that, that kind of wherewithal to know that he's good enough to go anywhere within that first round. But the pure excitement, the pure surprise, the pure shock that was on his face when he got selected third overall, and honestly, it's an interesting pick for Anaheim. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the Ducks are kind of in that. They're in the midst of a rebuild right now. They're not anywhere close to being competitive. They have a lot of high end talent in their prospect pool. Obviously, they just moved. We've talked about this a couple times. They just moved Drysdale this like late in the season for Cutter Gauthier. I mean, adding Gauthier, adding Mason McTavish, who's had a great start to his NHL career. There's question marks around the Zegras' future in Anaheim. So I mean, to add another piece like Beckett Seneca, I mean, it's just another piece to this puzzle that maybe in 2 to 3 years Anaheim could be a legitimate contender for the Stanley Cup once again. But it's going to be a fun team to watch. I mentioned it last year. I mentioned it last episode, and I saw it again by Cam Robinson. Actually tweeted out that this Calder race might be one of the most exciting Calder races we've seen in a long time. You've
absolutely.
got Jesper Wallstedt that's probably going to make make a push to be considered. Obviously, Macklin Celebrini, there's conversation that he will play for San Jose next season or this coming season. And then just all the other pieces that are falling into place. Cutter Gauthier could be up with the Anaheim Ducks. We don't know. That was part of the reason he wanted out of Philadelphia. And then obviously the McGordy stuff that's still going on. There's just so much possibility for this Calder race. And as you know, over the Hockey Writers, I'm doing this Calder revisiting Calder season. So I'm back in 1938-39 right now, revisiting some old, I think
way back in the past.
Cully Dahlstrom won in 1937-38. I just finished that piece. It's up on the Hockey Writers. So if you're a hockey historian, you like that kind of crap, take a look back at Cully Dahlstrom, and he won it with the Chicago Blackhawks back in 37-38. But this could be one of the most exciting races we've seen in a long time. I'm pumped for it. Obviously, anybody who's a draft geek or a prospect geek is going to be excited for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, the draft itself was interesting. Obviously, our Leafs had the 23rd pick. There was a lot of conversation going into it that they were going to hold on to that pick, and then all of a sudden they trade back, get a second round pick, as well as a late first, and they take that late first and they use it on Ben Danford. And I want to get your take on this because there was some. It's not as far stretched as an Easton Cowan in the first round, but there was some belief that they could get Danford a little bit later in the draft. At the same time, this is a big stay-at-home, solid defensive defenseman that could be one hell of a stalwart in a few years at the NHL level. Could be a major shutdown guy, and right now that's probably what the Leafs need in their organization. What are your thoughts on Danford?
Yeah, I mean, first off, we talked about like draft targets, how Stein Solberg, EJ Emery were names that the Maple Leafs could target, and they were definitely. I believe Solberg was taken before the Leafs pick, but Emery was right there for the taking.
Solberg was taken. Solberg was taken, I believe, the 23rd pick.
Yes.
With Anaheim's pick?
With Anaheim, they did trade with Anaheim. To move back.
This is very reminiscent of a John Gibson situation here. Something that I'm certainly going to touch on in an article coming up. But I as soon as I saw the pick happen, I looked at it and I said, this is going to be a situation where Leaf fans look back on it in 10 years and say, we could have had Solberg at 23. Yeah. But obviously, we'll see how Danford turns out.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the reason why they got that second round pick too, to get more draft capital, but they traded it later on for a pick next year. Still makes sense to get that second pick, right? Definitely a good move to get that one next year. But Emery was right there. Actually, both of them, like you said, both of them were there for the taking. And then they moved back and it was like, okay, well, what else do they have up their sleeve? And lo and behold, Ben Danford was a selection. And I believe there were very few outlets that had Danford as a first round selection. I think the only one that comes to mind was McKean's Hockey. Mm-hmm. And I talked with Brock Otten too. Like, he was very high on Ben Danford being a first round pick because of the underrated aspect, or like, you look at the offensive numbers, it's not that great, but there's more substance to his game that really does cement himself as a first round pick. You know, he's very steady in his own zone. He's very smart on the breakout, you know, can get into the lanes, block shots. I think, can't remember who said it, but you know, I want to say maybe it was Easton Cowan, but he was blocking one-timers from Casper Halton, and it was Easton about the Danford selection. You know, he was blocking one-timers from Casper Halton, and we know how heavy a shot Casper Halton has. And you may look to the postseason how the Generals didn't have a great, you know, championship series against the Knights. The Knights just bounced all opponents. Like, they were just dominant over everyone, but Danford did look very steady. He looked very composed, very well organized in his own zone. And I do think that this is the potential where maybe the offense isn't there now, but he's still a very young player. He could pop off next season and have a very productive draft year +1 season where maybe the offensive numbers are better than they are right now. And the big thing was, you know, when we were in the scrum, he had like, his strong second half was a big reason for that. And he quoted, or I'm going to read a quote in one of my articles about Danford, just feeding off my coaches, my head coach, Derek Laxdal, who got promoted to the AHL, has the experience in the NHL. So he knows what it takes, and kind of maybe open my eyes a little bit of what I'm going to be at the next level. That to me stands out, that he's got a very specific player type in mind, that he's not going to surpass expectations, that he knows what he's already going to be. And I think that's what's key. But if the offense does come, I think it's going to be huge, because he already has that steady defensive foundation, and he still can make big hits, get into lanes, block those shots, basically a younger version of Chris Tanev, which we'll get to later on right now. But I do think that it may come as a bit of a surprise, but not necessarily so much for the Maple Leafs, because like Easton Cowan last year, Wes Clark said that Ben Danford was their guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so
I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, no, he made it a point to say Danford was their guy all the way, and lo and behold, they got him. So back-to-back seasons where they're betting on upside in the second half, risky, but you know, it's something that could bode well for the Maple Leafs.
What's that saying? Risk it for the biscuit, and
yeah,
the Leafs have certainly done it the last two first rounds. To be honest, I'd be okay if Danford never popped off offensively. Mm-hmm. He's a guy that understands his game, knows what he's capable of, has that strong defensive side. I don't know if you saw the images from development camp where he's blocking shots from Jake Muzzin, who's obviously on the ice as part of the player personnel. Yeah. And Danford's going down and blocking those shots as well. And the part that stands out to me is there's zero fear. This is a guy that understands what his role is. He understands as a defensive guy. He understands he's a big body. And he's one of those guys that can, I think his ceiling is a solid 2-3. Maybe without that offensive upside, which I'm okay with because of some of the players that you will have coming up as well, who have that offensive. He's not a puck mover. He's not a guy he's not gonna join the rush. He's not gonna be the guy when it comes to the offensive side of the conversation. But you've got guys there that, I mean, Morgan Riley's still signed long term. You've got Topi Niemela still in the system. You have Timothy Liljegren, if he can find himself as another potential offensive piece to this blue line. The guys like McCabe and Tanev and Ben Danford down the road are players that you need to kind of solidify that blue line so that the other guys who are puck movers, who will join the rush, can do their part as well and play their game without the fear of not having somebody back to support them. So I personally, I'm not going to sit here and say I love the pick. I understand the moving back because you wanted more draft capital. It makes complete sense. I like the pick. I really strongly like the pick. I'm not in love with it yet. I want to see more from him. I want to see. He wasn't a focal point for me coming from a Leaf standpoint. That said, there's a lot of things that make sense about the pick, and I can understand why he was a target. Why Wes Clark came out and said like he was our guy no matter what. And you have to appreciate what Wes Clark's done for this organization as well, and he's obviously got a solid eye for talent. So I loved it. The Leafs did get more draft capital. I don't know if you want to talk about the goaltender that they picked up late in the draft. I don't know much about him. That said, I don't think you can have too many, goaltending prospects, and the Leafs seem to be heading the Russian route when it comes to goaltending, and this was another example of it.
Yeah, 3 more quick points on Danford before I move on to Obvincev. One right-hand shot, so you get a high, value player with a right shot defenseman. Obviously, let the offense come. We'll see what happens there. 2 actually on my post about Danford, Mitch L. Brown from Elite Prospects basically gave a really good summarization or tracking stats of Danford. Yeah, the shooting isn't there, but the transitional, the exit prevention, the entry prevention, the exit numbers are very strong with him. Third, Wes Clark also said that they tracked his offensive numbers and impact from last season as well. So again, the production isn't there, but the impact is. So there's a lot of potential there for him to grow as well. Yeah, like you said about the goaltending, I mean, it seems like, if there's a goalie available, and if he's Russian, basically drafted, because you're seeing that with Shesterkin, Sorokin. You're seeing that with Yaroslav Askarov, who's basically going to make a big jump to the NHL sooner rather than later. It seems like Russia is a good factory for developing or finding young goaltending prospects. I mean, Mikhail Yegorov, Ilya Nabokov, who just won with Magnitogorsk. Nikita Grebyankin was one of his teammates, the KHL championship. So it seems like, you can never have too many goaltenders as a result. I do think that, some steady numbers for Obvincev. My tab isn't quite working.
296 goals
no,
against. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, 296 goals against, 921 save percentage, 7-7 record in 16 NHL games. 19 years old, bit of an overager as well, but that's basically, that's if they're an overager, they're a little bit more seasoned. They know what the expectation is right now. So there's more of an upside there to draft overage goaltenders, and it's a big improvement from the season before when he was in the MHL. So betting on a little bit more of I would say a lot of those picks, the 5th and 7th round picks, are more of, letting them season a little bit more projection, or a little bit more of a project for all of them. And I think he's going to be a good project for the Maple Leafs as well, considering that they do have a good pipeline with Akhtyamov, Hildeby. They're probably going to be the 1-2 in the Marlies right now. So you might as well keep that system or that position very fresh for goaltenders. And they may have found somebody right there that could have the potential, because he's 6'4", 179, definitely going to add to that frame as well. So sees the net very well, isn't overly aggressive. He's very good with his puck tracking. So I think the Maple Leafs have seen good results so far. I think they're going to take that risk and bet on it that it could work out as well.
Yeah, definitely a big boy, a big guy in net, and that seems to be the trend for goaltenders as of late. Before we jump away from the draft, you were there, man. What was the biggest moment of the draft for you? What was the biggest surprise of the draft for you? And maybe was there any sort of letdown from your perspective?
Letdown, I don't think so. I think, when you're in Vegas, you go out, this could have been this most likely is the last in-person draft where, teams are going to be there. I think it may still be where media is going to be like an NHL, NFL kind of draft where the media and players are still going to be there, but maybe the team won't be. They're going to be, decentralized. I still think it was no better way than in Vegas to go out with a bang kind of thing, right? I thought that with that kind of venue, with that kind of city, it was made to go off into the sunset with this NHL draft. And hopefully, if the scheduling can be a little bit better, you can go back to a centralized draft where everyone is there and you have a little bit more room instead of 2 days in between Stanley Cup final, draft, free agency, where it's not as hectic. I think it still could work. It's what's great about the NHL draft because you do get to talk to the coaches, GM, scouts, everybody. It's absolutely great, and meeting all the other scouts and writers there as well. That's all absolutely fantastic. In terms of surprises, I did think that Carter Yakimchuk to the Ottawa Senators was more of a surprise than anything. I thought Zane Parekh was obviously both players are very highly offensive, talented defensemen. I think Yakimchuk has a lot more defensive deficiencies and issues than Parekh. I think if he's able to be a little bit more competitive, he could be a very solid, right-hand top pairing defender. I would have. I think a lot of people have had Zane Parekh going to Ottawa as well. Seems like a best fit, but they went with Yakimchuk, and I think he's a bit more of a work in progress. As for some of the names in the later rounds, like Luke Misa, Jakob Fibiger, some names that I'm very, very high on got drafted a little bit later, or not a little bit later, a lot later than they should have. Misa went into the 5th round. I had him for half of the season as a first, dropped to the second. Because of some consistency issues, a little bit of that, didn't quite have a standout playoff. But I really did think Jakob Fibiger would have been a great mid-round selection, 4th or 5th round at the latest. I thought he should have been drafted a little bit higher than anything. I really like his two-way play, very mobile, physical as well. To see him, and even Ryerson Leaders too. I think the Mississauga Steelheads, some players that should have been 3 players that should have been a little bit higher up got drafted later, and I think those were wins for. I'm going to have to go back and look at the teams. I believe Misa went to Calgary. Fibiger went to. Trying to see that. Fibiger went to Seattle and Leaners went to Buffalo. So I think those were very, very great selections for all three of those teams. I think they should have been a little bit higher up. I think those were the main surprises for me because I was very high on all 3 of those players.
I have to ask you quickly before we close it out here. There was a conversation about the Ottawa Senators and just kind of where they're sitting at and some of the moves that they've made, and obviously that pick was a little questionable. Are we on the verge of seeing Brady Tkachuk leave the Ottawa Senators in the next couple of seasons?
I think there was an interview where Steve Staios said that wasn't happening, but
I mean, every GM kind of wants to put that into the minds of their fan base, but
exactly. I mean, see, here's the thing. You don't want to compare his situation to Matthew, but Matthew left, signed in a better market and a better team and a better situation for him to thrive.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure. Again, it would be kind of counterintuitive if your captain isn't happy. You have to go and trade your captain because there's still a lot of question marks. But I think getting your top goaltender right now in Linus Ullmark was a very good start because that was a position that really killed the Senators all season long. And now that they have a number 1, that could work in their favor where maybe they are making the necessary moves to be a little bit more competitive. So hopefully that's a step in the right direction. But if it's going to be another scenario where they're competitive, have a hot start, fall flat midway point, and then miss the playoffs as a result, I don't want to say a trade will happen, but you could probably rest assured that Tkachuk is probably still going to be very, very disgruntled about the situation of what's happening because he signed that 8-year deal. He is basically their best player and still have nothing to show for it. So I think at some point he's going to probably say, hey, you know what, if you don't do something quick, I may not want to be here. I can't speak for Brady. I can't speak for the Senators because they're trying to do everything they can to be competitive, which is great. But who knows what's going to happen next season? I think next season will dictate the direction that things could follow or unfold.
Yeah, I think it was more the Chychrun move that really had me shocked. I didn't. From my perspective, I felt like they got pennies on the dollar, and it really didn't make sense to me. I thought Staios would come out with a bang, but Obviously, they were a little handcuffed with Chikrin kind of making it known that he wanted out. But anyways, we'll jump to free agency here because there was more than 1.2 billion dropped on day one of free agency. I believe it was 385 years of contracts were handed out. So do the math. Do the math. Through 1.2 billion divided by 385, and you'll kind of get the average of what each year is going to cost these teams. But the Leafs were busy. The Leafs were busy to say the least, and Brad Treliving has since come out and said they're still not done. There's a lot of speculation that what they're looking for now is filling out their bottom six up front. But from a defensive perspective, they did everything they needed to do. They re-signed Timothy Liljegren. Chris Johnston has since come out and said there's still a possibility that Liljegren could be shopped. But they also signed Oliver Ekman-Larsson. They traded for the rights of Chris Tanev, signed him to a 6-year deal. I believe he got a no-move clause on that as well. But
Tanev, no move clause, yeah.
A great price, though, on the 6 years from my perspective. And then, of course, the Yanni Hakanpää move as well. That's still kind of up in the air, but I when it comes to Steve Simmons and releasing people's medical records, I never really believe anything that he has to say anyway. So, Peter, break down this defense for us before we get into any of the forwards that re-signed, and before we get into the goalies. The Leafs look a lot tougher on the back end going into 2024-25.
A lot tougher. I would say a little bit more mobile and a bit better defensively within their own zone. And it starts with the Chris Tanev one. And we were kind of shocked where they acquired the rights at the draft at the very end. And, it basically gives them that front line or golden ticket to, bring up Willie Wonka on the Chocolate Factory to basically sign Chris Tanev as a result. And it didn't cost a whole lot. I mean, Max Ellis was great with the Marlies. I think he's a high energy forward, but he wasn't moving up in the lineup. He was always on the bottom six. You can part ways with those kind of prospects and a late round pick. That the price to give up for his rights was absolutely phenomenal in any situation. I think what stood out the most when that happened and Craig Berube took the podium was that he basically called him a heart and soul guy. Basically, that type of player that will do anything to win. And you see it throughout his career, blocking the shots, being fearless in those situations. And yeah, the injury concern is going to be very, very, something to keep an eye on. But let's say you get a good 3-4 years out of Chris Tanev before the injuries start. It's a $4.5 million contract. Yeah, it's a bit hefty, but that could have been a lot higher up if it was, let's say, a 4-year deal. I would take this and then put him on LTIR if he's unable to play. Yeah. That's the main thing that you're seeing right now with some of these teams where lower the AAV by extending the years and possibly putting on LTIR for that situation. Mm-hmm. And again, you could call it cap circumvention or, going around the rules or whatever, but it's within the rights of the CBA and every team to do so. But, I do think that Tanev was one of the guys that they needed to get. Obviously, I would have probably liked Matt Roy a little bit more, a little bit younger. Probably still could have had him at 5'5", but a little bit hefty, but you had to clear out more salary in order for that to happen, and it was difficult. I still take Chris Tanev. I think the biggest surprise was Oliver Ekman-Larsson. I think basically they said, maybe 4.5. And I'm like, anything more at that price, or I would be a little bit hesitant. But he signed for less than what was being reported at 3.5. And I think maybe if it was that extra year or two, that extra security, I think that's huge. And I think obviously he's had some concerns with his overall play being, kind of a defensive liability. The offensive numbers have kind of dipped down throughout his career ever since he had that mammoth, not necessarily mammoth season, but 55 points in 15-16. Has kind of tailed off, barely cracking 40 at times. But I think last season with the Florida Panthers, he looked a lot more comfortable and they utilized him very well. Obviously, there were injuries to, Ekblad and Montour at the start, but he looked pretty good, both with the puck and without him within his own zone. So I think if the Maple Leafs still utilize him in that third pairing role, limit the minutes a little bit, see what he can do, give him that top power play time because he can get pucks on that. He can manipulate situations. fake outs, getting into the open lanes very well. You need a shooter from the point, and he's definitely one of those guys that could get the puck on net. And, it showed in the playoffs too, being that, transitional player. Obviously, some defensive issues still remain, but I think he's taken a bigger step this season in order to improve in that regard. And I think playing under Paul Maurice, who gets the most out of his players, worked really well. And I think they could be the same with Craig Berube right now, where he has not just Morgan Riley at his disposal, but a better version of John Klingberg, the signing last year, and a little bit better defensively. So I think those two signings are very, very key. You have one that's an offensive defenseman and one that's more of a shutdown role. I think you have that balance. The Klingberg experiment didn't work out, and I think Tanev can do everything that Joel Edmondson's and what Ilya Lyubushkin can do combined. And it's basically two players in one. So you really don't need both of those players. He could do it all. And I think that's I really did not want to give Joel Edmondson that kind of money with his contract. I believe he signed for like 3.8.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, with the LA Kings, that seemed a bit too
4 years.
Yeah, I think that was one of the not so great deals of free agency. So I would gladly take Chris Tanev at 4.5 at 6, and you get 4 years out of him, and then place him on LTIR should he decline. But yeah, I think those two. I think Klingberg getting to that 3.5 range, I think was very, very great. And he's still 32. I mean, he basically said, I believe in one of his interviews with the Maple Leafs, he's still going to be at his best and do whatever the team needs him to do. And that's him to be an offensive contributor, but, don't stray away from what made you successful that helped Florida win the Stanley Cup. Probably difficult to do this time around, but the defense with those two players are in a much better spot than what they were at the beginning of last season and even into the playoffs.
So I'm going to throw a few comparables at you here. Matt Roy, 6 years, 5.75 AAV. Elias Lindholm, 7 years at 7.75. Brett Pesce, 6 years at 5.5.
That was a good one. Brady
Shea, 7 years at $7 million. Nikita Zadorov, 6 years at $5 million. Brennan Dillon, 3 years at $4 million. What else we got here? There's a few of them. Ian Cole got $3.1 million. Matt Grzelcyk, 2.75, which I actually was impressed with. I think he's going to be a great addition.
Yeah.
Aside from a few injury concerns with him. Matt Dumba, 3.75. Joel Edmondson, as you mentioned, 3.8 over 4 years. That one looks horrible. Ilya Lyubushkin got 2 years at $3.25 million.
Not great.
Not great at all. I'm just kind of scanning through some of the defensive signings that we had here. Obviously mentioned Toronto got Hakanpää for 2 years, $1.5 million. We'll get to that in a sec. Alec Martinez, I didn't mind this one. 1 year, $4 million.
Yeah, that was a good one.
But you can kind of see the trend that there was an overpayment for a lot of defensemen in this, especially in day one of free agency. I think there was a few steals. Obviously, like Winnipeg getting Colin Miller 2 years at 1.5. I think that was a good deal. I believe Matt Dumba signed for 2 years at, was it 4.5 or 3.75? Regardless, my point being is that you weren't going to get a defenseman of that caliber, of the caliber that Tanev brings to the table, for under $4 million. I think for them to get him for what they did, it was actually lower than what was first being reported. They first reported 6 at 6. And obviously that's not, it wouldn't have been ideal considering where the Leafs are looking to go with their cap. One name to also mention, the Leafs signed Philip Myers for 1 year, $775.
I was just about to get to that.
Yeah, Dakota Mermis 1 year, $775. So they added more depth to that blue line as well, going into camp. And I think that's the biggest thing. Like, those guys are obviously not going to be guys that make the roster out of camp. That being said, I think it's worth mentioning that there is that solid depth there as well, and that should be recognized from the Leafs standpoint as well. But yeah, I
I
think Tanev.
wonder.
Sorry,
I was
go
just
ahead.
about to say, I wonder if that Myers signing makes Timothy Liljegren even more expendable right now, because the contract is like both all. So Cedric Pare is two-way, but Mermis and Myers are one-way. So if they make the team, I believe if they make the team and have to be sent on waivers, they would have to clear it. There's a possibility that a team could claim them. But the fact that it's already one way and not two way, I think maybe, I don't want to read too much into it, but could there be that situation where maybe they feel more comfortable with Myers to give him that opportunity on the right side and get something in return for Liljegren right now?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, absolutely, and I think that's why Chris Johnson mentioned it as a possibility right
Mm-hmm.
now, because with the depth that they've brought in, there is that expendability on a guy like Liljegren, especially knowing that you have Topi Niemela down
Yeah.
in the minors as well. So there is. I think this is the first year in a while that the Leafs have had opportunity on the blue line where they can make moves to solidify that bottom six, and
Yeah.
that's got to be the focus right
Mm-hmm.
now. I know
That
that's the
6-7
focus for
spot, 8
yeah,
is going to be much more competitive.
absolutely, absolutely. Before we get into the forwards and the defense, or sorry, the forwards and the goaltending, Hakanpää, what are your thoughts on this whole report about his knee injury and that the possibility of him never making an NHL return, brought to you by the fine Steve Simmons over at Sun Media?
Yeah, it was a really interesting situation because it was all being reported. Everybody was saying, Hakanpää 1 or 2 year deal, 1.5 million, and that seemed like a steal because this guy's a freight train of a player, like
Mm-hmm.
hitting, getting in the lanes and blocking the shots. That's basically the type of guy you want to pair with Oliver Ekman-Larsson. That when he could go do his thing offensively, you have someone steady to shut things down and take away those lanes and help out on the back check or be that first player back. But when the knee issue came out and it created a little bit of a stir, it's like, well, why are you signing a player with bad knees? And if his career's in jeopardy, what was the point of all it? But it seemed like the doctors gave the okay to do the signing, but we still don't know. There's still a lot of question marks. Is he going to even show up to camp? Is this going to be one of those signings where, yeah, it's a cheap deal, but is it going to be one of those things where you see a player go to Robidaw Island very early because he's a very young, I mean, not necessarily young, but he's still 32, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, and he played in 64 games but missed the playoffs. So, don't really know what happened as a result of that because I think I mean, very limited time in the NHL
Late
for
season
his
injury.
career.
My understanding was a late season injury.
Late season injury, but only started playing in the NHL in 2019-20.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, pandemic year, things kind of went to hell as a result of that because things shut down. Then there was 2021, where he got traded from Anaheim to Carolina as well. Didn't get a whole lot of game time as a result. He got game time, but production wasn't there. Obviously, he's not that type of player. 57 games, 80 in 2021, 2022, 23. He had 82, 64 last season. And then the injury happened, and now it's all like a whirlwind of what's happening right now. I think the only answer we're going to have of this is if the Maple Leafs actually do have clarity already and they're going to finalize it and make it a point that, yes, he's good to go, he's going to clear, or we're going to be in limbo all summer. And then we're going to see what happens when training camp comes around. And if Hakanpää is there, great, but it still leaves a little bit of shadow of doubt over everything because of the knee situation. And if the situation is bone on bone as it's being reported right now, but if the doctors are cleared him or gave the okay to sign him, that maybe it isn't all as career ending or serious as we thought. It's still up in the air, but I do think that if he is good to go, I think this is going to be a very, very valuable signing because I think a lot of people have wanted him in the past year because he can hit like a tank. Like he lets nothing by. He takes away those lanes, and he's going to make his presence felt on the back end. And we saw it this year. I mean, there were times this year where he was an absolute force, but unfortunately in the playoffs, he didn't play. But he does have that skill set to be a very effective, gritty, physical type of defender as a third pairing. And I think that would have been really good. But until then, again, a lot of question marks surrounding that signing that is unofficially official, or we don't know at this point already.
Call me a cynic, but there's a part of me that would not believe that the Leafs would sign a player without knowing his medical history, even if it was remotely in question.
Even if there's some doubt, if they gave the okay and they feel like it's manageable.
Yeah,
I agree.
There's a piece of me that truly believes is Steve Simmons trying to get clicks. We've seen it in the past, the whole Phil Kessel hot dog story. We've seen his comments about when Matthews was diagnosed with COVID and how he brought that to light. There's a cynical part of me that believes that Steve Simmons is just a plain ass dick and just needs to get his 2 cents in there, regardless of if he's factual or not. I think anybody that lives in the area knows that Sun Media has become a little bit of a poster boy for what do you want to call it? Gossip, bullshit, I guess. I don't know. I'm not convinced. That's not to take away from all the writers that work there. I should mention that there's obviously some great writers that work there. Lance Hornby, as well as there's a whole number of them that still work there. I've had a lot of my doubts with Steve Simmons over the past many years, and this just kind of solidifies that from my standpoint. Aside from that, the Leafs did go out and they got their 1B in Anthony Stolarz, Stanley Cup champion Anthony Stolarz. On top of that, they went out and re-signed Max Domi to a 4-year, $4 million contract. And in the process had to see Tyler Bertuzzi go, which I'm okay with, knowing what they added in light of that. Your thoughts on the re-signing, your thoughts on Anthony Stolarz being the 1B and going into the season with Wall and Stolarz as your 1-2.
I do okay, I'm sorry, but that, seeing that Max Domi tweeted out from the Wolf on Wall Street, where I'm sorry, like that was the best moment that Maple Leafs fans had, and it was difficult to keep both Bertuzzi and Domi. And I think Bertuzzi, as great as he was down the final stretch, which Bertuzzi are you going to get? Are you going to get the one that struggled last season, or, the one that picked it up towards the tail end, was in front of the net, but still had those missed opportunities? I think Domi, with the energy that he brings, I think he was a bit more of a fit than Bertz. And I am willing to keep Domi on if it meant, unfortunately losing Bertuzzi. And if I had to choose both, I would have chose Domi over Bertuzzi. But I do think that was a really good signing. But in regards to Stolarz right now, I'm just trying to get everything right now and apply some filters here. So in terms of goaltenders that played in 27 games let me try that again. In at least 20 games played, Stolarz had a .925 save percentage, and that was second behind Laurent Brossoit. Goals against average 2.03. And you look at his numbers over the past few seasons, aside from last year with the Anaheim Ducks, it wasn't that great. But before that, I mean, he was with Anaheim for 3 more seasons ahead of that. Last season, that was the year where Anaheim knew that they needed to go into full-on rebuild. But before that, 1 game in 2019-20, 944 save percentage. But then he had 8 more after that, a bit of a bigger sample size, 926 save percentage. 21-22, 28 games, 917 save percentage. So you're seeing that steady progression of him becoming a capable backup at that point. But now you're starting to wonder if he could probably be a starter at this point. And the fact that they signed Joseph Woll to that 3-year deal. I think it gives him some reassurance that he's probably going to be the guy going forward. But the fact that Stolarz was available for them to solidify that depth, and in case something does happen to Wall where the injuries do happen or come into effect, you have someone capable that you could rely on and can play those key games, play those minutes, alleviate some of that pressure off of Wall, because he played 27 last year. If you're looking at probably splitting that with maybe 40-40, maybe giving Wall a few extra starts as well, I'm okay with that. If you split that, you could have that 1A, 1B situation like, Swayman and Ullmark. I'm not comparing the two to those two because they're an absolutely dynamic duo, or they were that dynamic duo. But you have someone capable in net. And the fact that you also signed Matt Murray to a 1-year deal as well gives you that reassurance that should something happen to Wall, if he's out long-term, you have Stolarz Murray. And again, you need to see what Murray could do when he comes back, but they felt confident to resign him to that 1-year deal to have that stability in net. And maybe even if they carry 3 goalies all year, I'm not sure if it's possible because Murray will probably have to go on waivers to get sent down. But if Akhtiyamov, Hildeby are your 1-2 in the minors, Murray kind of that go-between as well, it's not a bad plan. And it's a much better plan than what it was last year, where you didn't know what was happening with Murray. You had, Martin Jones. You had Joseph Wall, and you had Ilya Samsonov. Because of Samsonov's play, you didn't really know that. So you were relying on an inexperienced Wall and an inconsistent Jones. So you have a more experienced Joseph Wall, but a seasoned professional and a little bit more experience with Stolarz and better numbers as well. So I think that's a really good signing, and it fills out that depth where it's either 1A, 1B, or if they battle each other, that's going to be great.
Yeah, no, definitely a good problem to have going into camp and going into the season. Of course, when it comes to Domi, the one takeaway I had is Tom Brady has the passion. If you saw him comment on the Instagram post,
Yep.
The Wolf on Wall Street. Before we close it out here and get to the final point of the show, just a quick word from our wonderful sponsors over at DraftKings. Bet the action on the ice with DraftKings Sportsbook. Of course, you can take you out a future on the Stanley Cup champion for next season. I'm sure the Florida Panthers are the favorite going into next season. But download the app now and use code THPN. New customers get $150 instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 on hockey. That's code THPN on only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. The crown is yours. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort. 21 plus, age varies by jurisdiction, void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.com/hockey for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources. NHL and the NHL Shield are registered trademarks of the National Hockey League. Copyright NHL 2023. All rights are reserved. So finally, Peter, as you know, at the Hockey Writers, I released an article after Nick Robertson requested a trade out of town. Obviously, there's some frustration there with his status on the Leafs, not getting a full opportunity. I took the stance as the Leafs absolutely cannot give into this trade request. And the comments came flowing in. You need a trade him, blah, blah, blah. He needs a fresh start. These are the same. The one thing I want to say about these commenters is these are the same exact clowns. This is the one problem with Leafs Nation. These are the same clowns that if you trade him and he goes on to win a cup with St. Louis, let's all remember Alex Steen, folks, and Tyler Bozak.
Why did you trade him?
Why did you trade him? They will be the first ones to come back and say, why did you trade Nick Robertson at the age of 22 to go and when he's a potential 20-goal scorer, and that's exactly what I said in the article. I stand by. You don't trade him. You give him an opportunity, whether he's playing second or third line minutes. You get him in the lineup. Let him run with it this year. He was the 5th player on the Maple Leafs last season with 5-on-5 goals per 60 minutes. You give him the opportunity. This is a 20-goal scorer. You don't trade him right now. Even if he wants out, you tell him, we're going to give you the opportunity. Prove it to us. We know you have it.
Yep.
Let's see what you got. And you give him that opportunity. Injuries have affected this kid's status through the first few years of his NHL career. Don't be a fucking clown and say that it's, give him a fresh start and trade him. How many times have we traded guys way too early in their careers and they've gone on to have incredible NHL careers? This is a guy that needs to be in blue and white next season. I can guarantee you my bold prediction for the year, if he gets the right minutes, he's a 20-goal scorer this year. Mark my words.
Yep.
Anything on the trade request or Nick Robertson?
No, you nailed it on the head. It sucks that the request came after he got his qualifying offer, but I agree. He didn't have this. He wasn't put in that position to succeed under Sheldon Keefe. Let's hope that Craig Berube does the same right now, because if he wants to give those players that opportunity, he's got to do it. And if Robertson needs to run away with it and take it and not let it get away, that's on him to do it as well. I think you could probably move him mid-season if you don't see what you like, fine, but you got to give him more of an opportunity right now. The leash can't be short. He's too young. He hasn't even hit his prime yet. You can't let that get away.
Let him ride with it. Let him ride with it. Give him the opportunity until he gives you a reason not to. If you don't stick him on the second or third line and give him those minutes, this guy averaged just over 11 minutes a game last year and put up 12 goals, 14 goals.
Mm-hmm.
This is a 20-goal scorer you're talking about. You want to talk about the depth of your bottom six and where the fill-in scoring comes for Tyler Bertuzzi walking? Right here with Nick Robertson. He's a 20 to 25 goal scorer. No questions
I was just about
asked.
to say, he could be the Bertuzzi replacement. Yeah, 14 goals and 11-23. Let's say you bump that up to 15 minutes a game and give him second power play unit.
Better skater, better shot than Tyler Bertuzzi. This guy is going to be a 25-goal scorer. I have zero doubt in that. And if you move him now, I'm telling you, the guys that commented and said, trade him, get rid of him, he wants out, these are going to be the first idiots that come out and say, oh, why did we trade him at 22 years old when he had such capabilities? Because people like you gave up on him way too fast. And this is why I'm on the Liljegren train. This is why I'm on the Nick Robertson train. Call me a homer for wanting these guys to stick around. I'm sick and tired of giving up players way too early in their careers and just watching them succeed somewhere else and get their Stanley Cups and blah, blah, blah. It's time to focus on the guys that you drafted and you developed. Mm-hmm. Give them the opportunity to play it.
One more point, 18 giveaways last season, but 18 giveaways, 28 takeaways.
I mean, it speaks for itself. The numbers speak for themselves. Anyways, folks, we hope to have Alex back next week. Like I said, technical difficulties held him out of the lineup this week. Short-term lower body injury, whatever you want to call it.
Things happen,
man. But outside of that, Peter, I'm glad you made it back safely. I'm glad you had a hell of a time in Sin City.
Thank you.
One hell of a draft. The sites were incredible. As always, guys, shout out to the Hockey Podcast Network for continuing to push us. The DraftKings, Manscaped, No Name Hockey, SeatGeek. You want $20 off your first purchase at SeatGeek? Use code STICKSINTHE6. You'll get $20 off. And you'll get to go see your favorite team or a team that you've always wanted to see for that $20 off. Until next week, Peter, we're getting kind of into the dog days, but I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about. We'll probably be talking about Yanni Hakkapaa next week as well. But until next week, that's it for us. Episode 165, Sticks in the Six.